Hey everybody, this video is sponsored by Squarespace.
2 years ago, Elden Ring was released for the first time, and nobody knew where it came from. Except for From, who knew exactly where it came from. Them. Elden Ring challenged gamers at the time by asking them what would happen if a game was so good you didn't mind that it was rubbish, and that made it the defining title of this gaming generation. It's amazing that a game like Elden Ring was able to be so successful. Unlike other big hits like FIFA or Tetris, Elden Ring didn't have a story. But if Elden Ring did have a story, it wouldn't fit into a book. You'd need a whole series, something the two blokes who wrote it would never finish. George and Martin were famous for their Throne Game books, based off the television program of the same name. Throne Game was a ratings juggernaut thanks to its well-written characters, complicated melodrama, and frontal nudity. The show ended and everyone said it was shit, so George and Martin stopped writing the books and started on Elden Ring. You might think that a video game and a book wouldn't be all that similar, but you'd be wrong. They both use words, which are groups of letters that make the pictures go in your head. Except in the case of a video game, the words make the pictures go on a computer. There's also another player in the mix, the player. These players don't have much time to focus on the rich history George and Martin wrote because they're too busy getting their knobs flattened every time they walk around a corner, which is why the real story of Elden Ring happens here, on a YouTube, being explained by someone in a whispery, not America voice, and usually interrupted by an ad read.
That's right, gamers, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. You know, Limgrave is where you start your adventure in Elden Ring, but when you're starting your business, you might want to start with a website. Squarespace is perfect for that. Thanks to design intelligence, you don't have to be some sort of design miracle worker. Squarespace helps you figure that out and figure out what you want your brand identity to be. Make it something that stands out, but also has colors that work well together and shapes that don't look weird on the page. You don't have to be a graphic designer to use Squarespace, you just have to know how to click things. Everything here is drag and drop, super easy to use. Squarespace also makes it easy to sell content, whether you're selling physical goods or courses, or just exclusive videos. Squarespace makes it easy to set up different sections of your website so that people can get to the products they need that are from you. They're your products. And no matter how your customers want to pay you, Squarespace can handle that. Klarna, ACH, direct deposit, Apple Pay, ClearPay, and Afterpay even, if you want people to be able to buy now and pay later. Setting up your website with Squarespace is so easy. We built on your work computer in an afternoon because we thought it would be a fun goof. And it was. It was a very fun goof to make it. Using Squarespace is fun. Go to squarespace.com to start your free trial today. Then when you're ready to publish, go to squarespace.com/2lockmango and enter offer code 2lockmango for 10% off your first website or domain. Remember, click that link in the description and you can save 10% off on your first website or domain when you use offer code 2lockmango. Now, let's get back to learning about Limgrave.
The player plays as the Turkish, a fellow from some foreign land nobody's ever heard of, like Turkey. The game begins in the Chapel of Anticipation, but it doesn't tell you what to anticipate. Turns out, it's getting stabbed, which is disappointing for the Throne Games fans who are hoping for nudity. Nobody has ever beaten the Grafted Scion after the first bridge, so it's impossible to know what happens if you win. Maybe the game just ends, and you get the nudity you were hoping for in heaven. Everyone else gets dumped in a greasy cave and can either start the game proper or do the tutorial, like a baby. From is famous for holding the hands of the wee players who were too afraid to go start bashing their heads into the wall. Here, George and Martin use those words we mentioned earlier to tell you how to play the game. You can even fight another boss, the Soldier of Godrick. He might seem like any other common bloke you fight later in the game, but he's actually great practice. Soldier of Godrick prepares the player for the disappointment of seeing basic enemies counting as bosses and getting routinely copied as the game goes on. With the soldier bested, there's nowhere to go but Limgrave. It's called Limgrave because this is where your limbs go when you die in the game, unlike in real life where they stay attached to your body until they turn into drumsticks for your ribcage. Vari is an NPC, which stands for not particularly chatty. It's an interesting break of the fourth wall. Vari accosts the player for not being sexually active, something the game is able to gather because you're playing it. Just below, players encounter their first major wall, the Tree Sentinel. As his name implies, the Tree Sentinel is a sort of cop in Limgrave. He's very stupid, and he thinks the player is a tree, which makes you part of his juice prudence. It might seem like the Tree Sentinel is too strong for you when you start playing the game, but that's the genius of Elden Ring. Unlike other games from, Elden Ring is open world, which means the bosses aren't put in the right order. This encourages the player to explore, see all sorts of amazing enemies, weapons, and spells on fextralife.com while they figure out how to properly cheese the game and get it over with as quick as possible. Running past the tree cop introduces you to Santa, but there's no milk and cookies. Him and Rudolph are wicked skinny. Makes sense, everyone here sounds British, food must be British too. If you think the food is bad, you can get a crafting kit here and make your own damn supper. The crafting mechanic in Elden Ring is just like it is in Breath of the Wild, a bunch of boring nonsense you wish you could ignore. Unlike Breath of the Wild though, here you actually can ignore it, as well as the ingredients you see for it on the ground. Turns out the best way to beat a dragon isn't picking flowers, it's bashing them with big sticks and knives. Most of the time though, you'll want to just run away. That's where your horse comes in, though first a lady comes in, and then a horse comes in with her. Melatonin talks really quiet, probably because of the pink eye. Everyone in Elden Ring is depressed because they've been playing so much Elden Ring. She gives you a spectral seed, which you can plant for a horse called Torrent. Torrents and seeds are very important in all sorts of ways. You can get movies, TV shows, and even better video games to play, like Katamari Damacy. But the horse is good too. It lets you run past the enemies of Elden Ring, making the game shorter, so you can move on to something more fun, like Katamari Damacy. Rodrika is just sitting down in the spirit caller's shack because she's not afraid of anything, except spiders, but she's not afraid of jellyfish, must be a strong swimmer. The jellyfish she gives you isn't worth a drop of piss until you have the spirit calling bell. If you want that, you've got to go back to the Santa Church and meet Ronnie. She says her name is Renna, but that's actually a mistake by the voice actor. They left it in as a bit of an Easter egg, which means this church has Easter and Christmas, like most churches. You might think you're supposed to use the spirit ash because when you talk to the girl with normal arms, you get a free jellyfish, and when you talk to the girl with jellyfish arms, she gives you dogs. That's not right though. George and Martin gave you permission to use them, but there's someone you forgot to ask, a wanker on the internet you've never met. If you use a spirit ash, the game goes into a secret easy mode, where sometimes it takes a break from stomping you to stomp on your dog instead, and that just won't do. And just in time for another wall, Morgott the jumped. He says Margit the fell in the cutscene, but that's because like Ronnie's voice actor, he made a mistake. Watch the cutscene. Clearly, he jumped, he didn't fall. Morgott is also like the Tree Sentinel because he's a cop and he's too hard. It's confusing because none of the bosses from are soft. If you want Morgott to get soft, you have to leave him alone and don't give him any attention for a second. Instead, turn down the road and meet Benal. He gives you Ashes of War, which are a lot like spells, except they come out of useful weapons instead of a stick that isn't good for anything. It's great because when you run out of magic, you can still stick the monsters with the pointy end. They can get even better with a Jar Shard talisman, but it's not like there's going to be a big jar man you can murder for that, unless you wander a bit down the road and meet Alexander. Killing him is easy, but you could put something heavy in his back and wiggle it around in the hole to save him for later. Elden Ring is a game that rewards delayed gratification, which is another way of saying it isn't very fun for the first few hours. If you need to kill someone because you feel weak after Morgott and the Tree Sentinel, D is right here. He's after those who live in death, but he's bad at it because his mask doesn't leave any holes for eyes. Those who live in death are skeletons whose limbs don't go into the grave like they're supposed to. Instead, they let all the meat fall off so they can play their ribcage like a xylophone. In a Summon Water village, you can see one of these bonies, the Tibia Mariner. He was fired from the Bone Navy for being terrible at navigation as he's nowhere near the ocean. Probably why he's so easy to beat. The boat can't move if there isn't enough water to go up the boat engine and make it drive. Once you beat all the skelly men, D shows up to tell you where you can shove it. It being Deathroot, a weird plant that looks like bad spaghetti. This is also a trap, as it takes you to an open part of the world that will close the car door on your dick over and over again. Just go to the Third Church of America, which isn't the First Church of America, because George and Martin keep making mistakes. You finally have access to the Phi Sick Flask, something you can load with stuff to make the game easier. Unlike Spirit Ashes though, this doesn't count as making the game easier for some reason. Nearby you can meet Mr. Fortnite. He's yammering because he wants to play doubles, but what that really means is he wants you to fully wipe Tomato Town by yourself so he can take credit for the victory royale. To get there, you'll have to go through the Mistwood, an area that's aptly named because it would be better if you missed it. There's normal-sized bears, but George and Martin accidentally pressed the wrong key and made some of the bears too big. They also gave a man a dog's face. Blade has a big sword, probably how he got the name. He's mad at some blokes named Darren and Will, so just add them to your to-do list. Elden Ring is full of people who need you to do their jobs for them because they're wasting all their time playing Elden Ring. Fortnite is a nice place to imagine, but it's scary to visit. There's a man whose face is a circle, and rats come up to your waist, then bite your waist. All of it is worth it for half a rock that's actually the key to a big elevator later. And Mr. Fortnite gives you a knife, which is probably worse than whatever you used to wipe out Tomato Town. He's looking for a lord to Limgrave, but apparently the Turkish isn't good enough. It's another job for you to do. All these responsibilities might make you want to jump off a bridge. If you choose the right bridge, it could lead you down the path to the Murkwater Cave. Outside you'll have to fight near furious. He's mad because his parents accidentally spilled their coffee on the keyboard when they were naming him. His knives are better than the one from Mr. Forkknife, but if you can survive long enough, you'll get helped by Yura. He's a master swordsman, but you wouldn't know it. His helmet makes it impossible to see. That's why his sword's so long. He can't be accurate with all that shite in front of his eyes. After the fight, he'll tell you there's a big dragon named Agil near the dragon-burnt ruins on Lake Agil. Considering how little writing there is in this game, it's good that George and Martin took the time to put in important details like that the player could miss. Murkwater Cave is home to Patches, who's a lot like Gollum from Lord of Rings, the prequel to Elden Rings. It's not clear if he likes the Turkish or not, though it seems more likely not, since he tries to stab you. Unlike most bosses though, Patches has good enough sense to surrender after you've hit him with a hammer a few times. He's actually here to show you that surrendering is totally okay, and giving up is pretty chill. You could always go do something else for fun, like play checkers or have a wank. Surprising no one, if you step onto Lake Agil into the dragon-burnt ruins, you're attacked by Agil, a large dragon. Even though he's big, he's surprisingly not as difficult as some of the bosses. Unless you summon Yura, who continues to be useless and actually stops you from using Torrent because he's afraid the police will be mad at you. The dragon's head is extra sensitive. In that way, they're just like us. But in many more ways, they aren't. They're scaly, they have wings, fire breath, claws, fangs, can't talk, and don't have genitals. Right on the side of Agil Lake, you can find Darren and Will and bring Blade to fight them. Here you see why he's called Blade, because of his big blade. Darren and Will are two kids stuffed in a suit of armor pretending to be a grown-up, but in Elden Ring, it's okay to kill children, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, like world peace or getting at it with a blue girl who has too many arms. Who knows how many fannies she has. But if you don't like running errands to win over a broad, you could always just buy her love, and this one is Selen. To engage in prostitution, you've got to fight a big head man. It's the same big head man you saw on the bridge and in Fortnite, but this one has a boss health bar because George and Martin couldn't be fucked to make a unique boss. Like most sex workers, the money you spend on Selen will leave you with nothing of real value. Instead of getting your rocks off, you get spells. They're just as good as attacks, but worse, because they use your magic, make you stand still, and are as useful as a wet noodle until you're over leveled. That's not fair. At least with a noodle, you have supper. The Weeping Peninsula is really more of its own area, but we've got a video to pad out, so just like George and Martin, we'll throw the Weeping Peninsula in there to kill some time. Now it's called the Weeping Peninsula because everyone here is so sad, which makes it just like every other area in the game. Irina mistakes the Turkish for a postman and asks them to deliver a letter to her dad. An understandable mistake. She can't see very well with the blindfold on. Nobody knows why she wears it. Maybe it's LASIK. Maybe she got pink eye from rogering around in someone's bum. Either way, she's picked a terrible time to be blind. We don't know what the letter is from Irina, but my money is on I, because there's two of them. If you head down to the castle, you may experience some unique enemies depending on the time of day. The Knights Cavalry come out at night, and good for them. The world in Elden Ring is so hard, so if their fellow knights get their rocks off, who are we to judge? You might think it's best to get on your horse to fight another bloke on a horse, but that's a trap. You actually only ever meant to use your horse to run away, because it's the worst horse in the world. Other horses might as well be made of bricks with the amount of damage they can take, but they can't be made of bricks, because they're made of glue. Meanwhile, a stiff breeze would knock your horse on its arse, or up a tower, thanks to spirit springs. Your horse is actually a spirit, and these windy areas put springs in its feet, which is why it's able to jump so high. Here we get the Great Turtle Shield, one of the best shields in the game. In the tradition of other great shields from games, you don't block with it, just stick it on your back and your stamina gets better. You don't understand why if you've ever been spit roasted by Raph and Donatello at a Comic-Con. As the night passes, it's time for Morn. Castle Morn is full of flying monkeys from the hit film Wizard of Oz. Wonder if there's anything to do with that Godrick fellow people keep mentioning. As long as you're in the area, you might as well give Edgar that letter from Irina, but he needs to buy a vowel because he's not leaving the big sword that he's meant to be guarding. Like most folks in Elden Ring, he's doing a bad job because the sword is on the other side of the castle, being held by the Leonardo Misbegotten. He's got the decency to show up for the fight, and we end up with a special sword. It looks just like Big Chair from Throne Game. Another disappointment for Throne Game fans. I'm sure they'd rather have swords that look like a pair of tits, or a nutsack, which are much more important to Throne Game. With the castle liberated, Edgar returns to his daughter, but this Misbegotten chopped in half. The killer even left their cleaver. We hardly knew her. Completely unrelated to Irina, a village up the hill has succumbed to madness, which makes the rats and people go so crazy it leaks out their eyes. Either that, or they've been rogering around in someone's bum. This is just the first clue in the mystery of frenzy. Where did it come from, and what makes it come? Perhaps we'll find out later. First, it's worth talking about the Morn Tunnel, which isn't even that close to Castle Morn, but it is full of those flying monkeys. Their boss is even another single begotten. Maybe one day she'll be Mrs. Begotten, but I doubt it, because she's dead. At least we know she isn't afraid of commitment, because when you defeat her, she drops anchor. The whole journey is about making it to the nerd tree, and it looks like we've almost gotten there. You can even fight the avatar, so I guess the game must be almost over. Its fighting style is interesting, as it basically just tries to flatten you with its arse over and over again. Lots of people didn't know that trees can have an arse, but they can. Maybe this is the arse that all those rats in the arena were rogering around in. Apparently all you get from beating them is a few sick ingredients. That's very open world of them. Elden Ring is actually so open world. Most of the game takes place after you beat the final boss. Look, there's a big turtle. Players in Elden Ring are so illiterate, they think turtles are dogs. That's what happens when the only way to understand the story is through a YouTube. There's even some other familiar faces. Selin is back, but this time she's tied up in a kinky sex dungeon. I hope you didn't think you were her only customer. Best to let her do her business. Come back later. Now you need to head back into Limgrave proper. There's no more openness down here. The Weeping Peninsula is closed, but there's still more open in Limgrave. You can even talk to a bush that won't shut up. Turns out it's actually a fuck ugly little gnome in disguise as a bush. Some of the mean blokes have been bullying him for being so fuck ugly. But after going through the cave, you find out the blokes that were bullying him were fuck ugly too. Perhaps even uglier. This is the first of many boss fights that are actually two boss fights at the same time. Sometimes George and Martin couldn't be bothered to come up with something new to fight, so they just lazily did the same thing twice to pad out the runtime. Sometimes George and Martin couldn't be bothered to come up with something new to fight, so they just lazily did the same thing twice to pad out the runtime.
There's a secret path to the other side of the cave that brings you to the Church of the Dragon Come Onion. It's a place you can cash in on dragon hearts for dragon spells. Most spells are slow and cost lots of magic, leaving you less health while getting punished more. But this is different because it's worse. They're slower and cost more magic. There are plenty of people who defend these spells religiously because they drank the Kool-Aid, or in this case, the Come Onion. Lots of religions have Come Onions, but this one's from a dragon, so it's bigger. If you're not into scrounging around dingy caves, there's ways to fight bosses out in the overworld. These are the Everghouls, and they're just as scary as they sound. Bosses like the Crocodile Knight are even harder than Morgoth. George and Martin have clearly never seen a crocodile. This one has horns, wings, and a giant sword. The only thing it has in common with a crocodile is its complete hatred of all living things. Eventually you'll run out of open and have to try closed by going back to Margaret, but it might be better if you bring a friend. Big Hat Roger uses spells and pointy sticks, and spells that make pointy sticks. These spell sticks are great at making Morgoth stop moving with something called a stance break. It changes his stance from proper posture to the sort of limp dick shrimp floppiness the players of Elden Ring are entirely too familiar with. Spells might be great at getting stance breaks. Hopefully Roger will show up later to show us the ropes that he's shooting. TikTok is blocking off the path to the next boss because the true danger of TikTok is interrupting your productivity. If you ask him nicely, he'll open up the main gate, but suggests a side path instead, saying it's safer. After fighting Morgoth, you probably think you're hot shit and just run up the main gate. Then you get shot and change your mind, which is unusual for people who are shot. Most of the time they just die. Now TikTok said the guards don't know about the other path, but that's a load of bollocks. There's numerous guards here, some skinny, some bigger. Eventually you find a room that TikTok locks you in, because TikTok loves prank videos. The further you move up the castle, the more terrible abominations of God you'll find, like birds with knives taped to their feet. And the British. There's even another Garfield scion, except this time you'll have access to your healing juice, making it even more humiliating when you lose. Roger is hiding out in a church. Either that or he's going to confession, because he feels guilty for spending all his runes on prostitutes. Nefeli Rue isn't a prostitute, and even more disappointingly, is related to Gideon Ofnir. Their names are different because Nefeli changed her name to Rue when she married her work. That work, having the sauce. Like Roger and Margaret, you can summon her to help her with Godrick. He has a unique disfigurement that causes him to grow more arms, no matter how many times he chops them off. Apparently malaria bullied him for it, but we'll talk about her in 8 to 10 more videos, depending on how many ad reads we can sell. All of those extra arms make Rick a master of the elements. When he makes wind, you need to clear out. Must be bean season in Limgrave. His axe can also hit the ground so hard it causes it to shatter. But later, if you choose to use the axe, it barely puts a tickle on the freaks you have to fight in this game. Gotta be the Godrick difference. Not to be outdone, Nefeli also has axes, and hers are loaded up with lightning. She uses Stormcaller Ash of War, but you should use the Phone Caller Ash of War and see if she wants to catch a matinee and get some biscuits. She's frankly quite out of your league, but you don't want to put her off with something too serious. Halfway through the fight, Godrick assumes you're bullying him for having too many arms and tries to cut one off. It's embarrassing, but like those blokes what drew the sexy mermaids on maps, it comes with the territory. Apparently he was bullied because of his parents' marital status. This bloke has 4 fathers. Limgrave may be home of Stormveil Castle, but it's also home of phobic.
Godrick is so pathetic, he calls a bear witness who never shows. We know there are bears in Limgrave. They were hanging out by Fort Hyde, trying to get a victory royale. Or maybe he was calling his burliest dad to come help. That's the genius of George and Martin's writing. You never truly know what the fuck is going on. By giving the dragon to his hand, Rick is able to put on one hell of a puppet show, shooting fire everywhere, like Bret Michaels' cock after a Poison tour in the 80s. Unlike Bret Michaels though, Nepheli Rue doesn't fuck around and makes quick work out of Godrick. When you come back, TikTok is kicking Rick in the face for being a bad boss, which I think is unfair. If anything, TikTok should show up after you fight Placidusax and kick his face for being a bad boss. I guess Rick made the work week terrible, and all of his employees dreaded Mondays. That's why they called him Godrick, the Garfield. That's all for Limgrave, but there's another secret area we should discuss before we head to Lernia, an area that must have existed for centuries, the Roundtable Old. Here you'll meet all sorts of interesting characters. Gideon Ofnir is a real know-it-all, but once you get to know him, you'll find out he's an arse. Corn got his nickname from drinking syrup, which is how he lost his eyes. Diabetes is the dark souls of health conditions. D is back and he's sitting next to Dialos, both to confuse you with their names and to make him seem like a big strong man. The blacksmith is huge, and also, that's his name. He wants to make a weapon that could kill God, so he's basically Ricky Gervais if he wasn't all smug about it and could probably manage to get a second season of his workplace comedy on air. Fia is the deathbed cum onion, and in between those layers is a nasty disease that saps your health. She's still a nice lady, and getting a hug from her is the closest a lot of players get to feeling love from a woman. There's a bone man who doesn't want to talk, probably because D is near. Although D also hates Fia. There's a lot of people he'd have a problem with if he ever took the damn helmet off so he could look around. These two ladies sell things to you and hang out far away from Huge, because even shopping has to be hard as tits in this game. Roger is still alive, but he's got a blanket on his lap so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of Fia. The undisputed star of the show are the Two Fingers, agents of the state who have a plan for you. People have mixed feelings on them because of this. Those who are anti-state might not like them, but those who are pro-state probably love the Two Fingers. Nepheli Rue is back and gives you a gift. Maybe you've got a chance with her after all. Maybe she could help Mr. Fortnite out and be Lord of Limgrave. Think of it. Nepheli Rue, Limgrave. Seems like a good match. Gideon can give you lore on bosses, but that's my job, and I want to milk these series like the Two Fingers milk the pro state, so I'll ignore that. You've conquered Limgrave, and your reward is a big chair. Either that or Lernia, which stretches out in front, with so many majestic mysteries we can't get into now, because I need to sell another ad read. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, it's a new format. We could use some support and shares amongst your friends who like Elden Ring. Joining the Patreon is also a big help. That's the best way to support us financially. They take less of a cut than YouTube and Twitch. We've also got other channels where we played Minecraft for the first time recently, built some commander decks, and do D&D 5e homebrew, so check those out as well.